Okay, so of course, today we're going to be talking about sustainability and particularly sustainability measures that can be done in 2020, hopefully started and finished, right? So that's our goal for today. And of course, we have our special guest with us, Caitlin Southwick, who is the founder and executive director of Kai Culture. And I'll let her kind of explain what exactly Kai Culture is.
All right, sounds good. Well, thank you so much. Thank you for having me. I'm honored to be here and really excited about seeing how many people are interested in this topic. So it's really wonderful. Yes, so as Mackenzie said, my name is Caitlin Southwick. I am the founder and executive director of Key Culture and Sustainability and Conservation. My background is in art conservation. I have a doctorate from the University of Amsterdam in stone conservation. I've been a conservator for 9 years. But I finally came to the point where I couldn't, in my right ethical mind, conserve art while I was destroying the planet in the process. So I started sustainability and conservation 4 years ago to really address the issues of being more environmentally responsible in the field of art conservation. So that included everything from greener practices to greener approaches for preventive conservation, something I think we'll talk a little bit about later. And just really also getting the word out there and building awareness and better communication amongst conservators globally. And through my work at SIC, I was then invited to be a member of the working group on sustainability for ICOM. So I've been the secretary of the working group for the last 2 years. I will continue in that role for the next 2 years. And through my work there, I really realized that it's not just conservation that has this issue, but it's actually museums and all of cultural heritage. And while there are all of these incredible initiatives and amazing work being done internationally, there was a bottleneck with people working together and talking and communicating and finding collaborations that were really needed. So I started Key Culture. We registered officially in November of last year, so we're still quite new. So if you haven't heard of us, that's why, but you've heard of us now. And Key Culture is the first nonprofit organization dedicated fully to sustainability full-time in cultural heritage. So the first 2 projects that we're really developing this year, we decided that 2 entry points for making cultural heritage and art in general more sustainable is, first of all, to provide a resource center for this information. So we're creating our digital resource center, which will house everything from case studies to literature to bibliographies, descriptions of best practices, and everything that you want to know about being sustainable all in one place. And we're also working on developing our Sustainability Ambassador program, which will be a way for practitioners, artists, and cultural heritage professionals globally to be able to engage with sustainability. We are designing a series of what we call key books, which are basically how-to manuals on how to be sustainable. And they're very actionable, they're very simple, they're basically a translation of all the sustainability jargon into something that is relatable for us as cultural heritage professionals. So very simple step-by-step ways to achieve sustainability. And the key books are themed. The first 3 that we're working on this year are energy, waste materials, and social sustainability. Next year, we'll be developing 4 more, which include Indigenous relations and traditional knowledge, outreach and education, exhibitions, and water. So these books are really the core of the Ambassador program. The Ambassador program is designed to help implement the actions in the key books. So that includes regional mentorship program where ambassadors can call in, find out more information about what they're doing and find partnerships and create this local community, ask questions, get support. And we also offer accreditation and trainings. So these will all be available in January of 2021. We will be making announcements and opening registration starting, I believe, in just a few weeks here. And so keep an eye out for that. You can follow us on social media, check out our website, www.keyculture.com, and find out more information there. Yeah, and this year we've, COVIDing it up like everyone else. We started doing some professional development courses. And so if you'd like to come join us there to learn more about sustainability, love to have you. You can find out more information once again on our website. So yeah, so that's a little bit about me and what we do over at Key Culture.
Great.
Great.
Thank you so
And
much.
now should be the perfect time for people to bone up on
Exactly. It's a good time to start, taking a little bit of the extra time that we've been given right now and figure out what our sustainability strategies are for reopening and what we can do to start mitigating our impact.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And I appreciate your correction of my my ancient
Trust
Greek.
me, no, you're not the first person. It's very interesting because Ki is the spelling of our organization. Ki is actually the Sumerian goddess of earth, so Ki, but it's a play on the word key, of course. So we're very cheeky with that and like to say like key partners and key ideas and key points, but it's spelled Ki, and actually the symbol for our logo is the cuneiform written version of key. So it's it all ties in there. You've got the cultural heritage, you've got the earth stuff, but
I like that.
I actually one of my board members still pronounce it Ki culture, which I think is really funny because he's on the board. He should know what it says. That's okay though. So anyway.
So why don't we jump in? Oh, of course. Well, I should tell everyone who else is with us today. We have Annika, who is ArtCheck's founder and CEO, and she is also a verified sustainability resource for particularly coming from art technologies, right? And then we have me, and I've actually worked on a lot of, I'm Mackenzie, of course, not hello at ArtCheck, I'm Mackenzie, and I am the head of digital marketing at ArtCheck. And I actually have a fair amount of experience with developing eco-friendly products. So kind of interested to have us all chat. It's going to be great.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So I think what we're going to start with, we're going to kind of do this in three major categories for everyone who has joined us today. We're first going to talk about how to implement sustainability solutions for your premises, your offices, museums, galleries, warehouses, etc. Then we're going to talk about art movement, how to make that more sustainable within 2020. And then last, we'll talk about conservation and collections management, and then a little bit about, what might come after 2020 and what we might talk about in future series. So why don't we start with premises and offices and museums and galleries? What would, Caitlin and Annika, what would you say are some of the top things that people can do this year to make their locations more sustainable?
Do you want to kick us off, Caitlin?
Oh, I'll get started. Sure, why not?
Yeah.
Well, I think in terms of, in terms of making sustainable change, I think some people can feel overwhelmed by it because it might be, oh, well, I don't have control over, who our energy provider is, or I can't make the decision to turn off, all of our HVAC systems or things like that. But there's actually so many things that we as individuals can already do. One of the things that I talk about a lot in the courses that I run is this concept of phantom power, and just this idea of getting to know a little bit more about your energy consumption. So that's a really easy in for reducing your energy consumption, but also reducing your energy bills, is looking at what you're doing in terms of consuming energy and conserving energy. So simplest things. I mean, it's as common sense as turning the lights off when they're not in use, or shutting your computer down at night. But a lot of people don't realize that actually a lot of appliances and equipment continue to consume power even after they're turned off if they're still plugged in. So this is a concept that was very new to me. And it's this whole thing of, like, for example, a photocopier. If you leave that on standby overnight, it consumes the same amount as energy that's needed to make 30 cups of tea. So it actually is still consuming energy. It's a huge amount. It's a huge amount. And it's really quite shocking because we think, oh, it's on standby, so it's in power save mode, it should be fine. But actually, these photocopiers need to be completely shut down. So just starting to look at different ways of where your energy consumption is and finding out what you can do to mitigate that. And there's a couple of quick and dirty tricks that I'd like to share. One of them is you can buy something called an energy monitor, and it's like $20. You can get it on Amazon, And basically what it does is when you it's like a extended plug. So you plug it into the wall, then you plug your appliance into the monitor, and then it reads how much energy is being consumed by that appliance or by that piece of equipment. And it's a really great way to see if your appliance, how much energy it's consuming when it's on, but also how much it's consuming when it's off. And then that can also give you an indication on whether or not you need to leave something plugged in, and it's okay to do that, or if you actually need to unplug a device in order to save your energy. And yeah, go ahead.
I also
Annika.
know a sensor guy, a friendly UK-based guy, and if anyone wants to get in touch, we can forward you the details. He has a slightly swankier version, which is where you can add a sensor and then have like a web-based app that will tell you about like all of the different electric data, and you can plug in, you know, your data cost, and it can tell you how much you would save by, you know, switching your photocopier off or whatever it may be. And you can identify areas where, you know, maybe you don't have LCD lighting yet and things like that, different spikes.
Yeah, that's brilliant. Yeah, that's very helpful. So
Yeah.
I think, yeah, just educating ourselves about our energy consumption is really the first way to start mitigating it. Absolutely. Yeah, another really quick and easy trick is putting in power strips or surge protectors that have the little off switch, so you can plug your appliances in there and then switch them off when they're not in use, and that stops the power from going. So that's also a really helpful way to deal with office items and electronics and equipment that are maybe a huge power suck and we didn't even know it.
Absolutely, and maybe that's a good point to mention. Julie's Bicycle have a tool for kind of measuring carbon footprint, and they work already with a lot of Arts Council funded organizations here in the UK on that. And so they would be a good resource to get in touch with in terms of working with them on identifying your carbon footprint and kind of delving deeper into the detail of that. But I know that they work with some galleries as well. And so I don't know if that's like a secret, if I should say or not say who they are, because I think I saw some of them here in the room. But so maybe they can tell me in chat if it's okay to name them. But so I think that is you know, as you say, a really important first step. I'm sure that there are other, you know, resources in terms of calculating carbon footprint, but I think that, you know, kind of consolidating our approach in some ways makes a lot of sense, and that's something that we should, you know, maybe think about.
Yeah, and Devin actually asks, does the power strip use power when it's plugged in but switched off?
It's not supposed to, no.
Unless it's broken.
Yeah, the point of it is that it cuts power. It's actually, they were originally designed not for energy savings, but for safety measures. The idea was basically like if your house got hit by lightning, then the surge protector would be the thing that exploded rather than all of the appliances. So it's not, it should not have a power coming through it.
Yeah, and that's why now
Good
a
question,
lot of your
though.
personal.
That's a great question.
Yeah, it is. A lot of your personal electronics, like for example, your computer plug-in, have this box in the middle of it. Let's see if I can grab mine. Oh no, then it fell off. But it has that box in the middle of the cord, because that is actually now works as the surge protector for the device, right?
Oh, interesting. Yeah. Oh, very interesting. Yeah, there are also different things you can do, like little their devices. I actually have my box here. I used this this morning in one of my webinars, so this is why I have my little box here.
Oh.
So these are little energy, these are basically switch and power meters, but they also, you can like plug it into the wall, plug your device in, and then set what times it's on. And so you can actually, like, I use this for my cell phone at night, so my phone only charges for 3 hours, even though I can just plug it into the wall and it's you know, plugged in for the entire evening.
That's great. I need to get one of those, actually.
Yeah, super handy. I actually, Belkin is the brand that I used when I lived in the US, but this one is Eve Energy. So I don't know if you guys can see that, but I like it. It's a really nice one. There are also cheaper versions. This one's a fancy one that you can like use your phone to control it, but there are also ones that are like $20, and then you could set the timer on it and then it turns off after a certain amount of time. So it's a really great way as well for you know, tips at home and also in the office. And if you're really bad at remembering to turn things off, then you can just get one of these, and that's an easy win. But Annika, what you were saying a little bit earlier about, carbon tracking and things like that reminded me, one of the other really big things that's important in terms of arming yourself with knowledge is getting to know your facilities manager. Find out who your facilities manager is and start the conversation, because I know a lot of people who don't know who their facilities manager are, and there's facilities managers always looking for great ways to save energy or have discussions about energy reduction options. And as a conservator, there's always that room for conversation, especially about climate control aspects and set points. And the facilities manager is the person to talk to. So make friends. That's somebody that's going to be absolutely invaluable for the rest of your sustainability journey.
That's great advice. And I would also say one of the things that we've really identified as being an issue in our world about this is where the responsibility for it lies, right? And so
exactly.
I think having an internal advocate, a champion that's identified as the champion.
Sustainability ambassador.
Exactly. A sustainability ambassador. Well coined. That's exactly what you need.
Thank you.
And then, but also who is the decision maker about these changes, right? And
100%.
making sure that the sustainability ambassador has a direct line to the decision maker, and that they have regular reports and meetings about those decisions being made, so that change can actually be driven and ideas can be implemented, because I think that is a major issue we have in the heritage and art world.
Absolutely. And I couldn't agree with you more. And I think that one of the big bottlenecks right now is that maybe we're unsure about who is supposed to start this conversation. So as a conservator, I'm thinking, okay, well, my director is the one who calls the shots on what our climate control is, for example. But the director is thinking, okay, it's up to the conservator to come tell me what I need to be doing in terms of our set points and our fluctuation levels. And so actually no one's starting the conversation, which leads to a big fat miscommunication. I actually had a conversation with the head of conservation at a museum in the UK. And she said that after 6 years of her museum being open, she finally had a conversation with the facilities manager about their climate control. And apparently the facilities manager had misunderstood, and he had the set point at 19 degrees, not at the range of 17 to 21, which she had indicated, but he had it at 19. And their system was working so hard over time to get to exactly at 19, that when he relaxed it to that range of only plus or minus 2 degrees, they saved 60% on their energy bill.
Wow.
And they had this happening for 6 years.
For 6 years, because they'd never said hello in the hallway and didn't know each other.
Exactly. So if there's one thing you should do, start the conversation, talk about it, find out who is the decision maker, because you know what, it might be you and you didn't even know it.
Yeah, no, that's a brilliant story. And I think and also there are lots of organizations, many of whom are here, who don't have a conservator in-house either. And so you might need to get someone in who can advise you, or look up the Bizoit Green Protocol, which major museums have said this is okay. We can relax our conditions for art and cultural objects to this parameter, and it's definitely a lot more relaxed than the kind of traditional climate controls that are in use. And one thing that you just need to double check is that there's about like 5% of material that does need that rigorous control. And those things, those more fragile and sensitive things, should be put in a micro environment within a frame or within a display case or storage, and so that's just something to check. And you can easily get that checked if you don't have a conservator by inviting one in to do a survey and assessment and help you with that process. And I actually saw Sarah Giles from Plowden and Smith is here with us, and I'm sure she would like me to plug them to say, for those in the UK, I'm sure they can provide that service for you. I know there are plenty of others. They can identify themselves here in the chat, but there's one for you.
Brilliant. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I think, we a lot of institutions, I think, are, and maybe we need to have an entire separate webinar about just the green protocol and different climate conditions and climate change aspects. But I think, you know, it's really interesting to think about, okay, why are we using these protocols or these regulations? And actually, when the science is saying that we can be more relaxed about it, or that, you know, it's actually not applicable to our collection or our geographical location, because that's another thing.
That's a very important point that I do think we should touch on. You know, the traditional climate control standards were created with the English countryside in mind,
Exactly.
and are very unapplicable to places like Africa, New York, I mean,
Australia.
Texas. Yeah, so many places.
Pretty much anywhere else on the planet.
Yeah, exactly. Pretty much everywhere other than England. And so, and really, as we conservators know, that the big problem is massive change in a short period of time from whatever environment the object is used to. And actually, in some cases, it can even cause damage to put something in the, you know, quote unquote correct environment quickly from an environment that the object is used to in Brazil
Exactly.
or Africa or wherever it may come from, where it doesn't have the same parameters in place.
Mm.
And so, you know, there, I think in hindsight, it's fair to question, you know, those being the standards in the first place. But the reality is that people are now used to those standards, and they're, you know, in place in a lot of lender agreements and just, you know, people's procedures and protocols and what they've heard you're supposed to do. And it's also really interesting to note that so many people working in a heritage and museum and art environment, especially if they're not conservators, but even if they are, just don't question this, and don't think that they can question this. It's like taken for granted. I was recently watching a video from the We Are Museums website, which was about a conference that they held last year, and there was a representative from Tate there who mentioned that, and I think her name was Dr. Carol. I'm not sure about the surname, but she said
Black?
that. Yes, I think that, thank you. So she said that, just to give you some idea in terms of context, Tate Modern, that one building, and let's remember that Tate has many buildings, I think 7 at least. The one building of Tate Modern has the carbon footprint of 28,000 homes. So this is a big issue, because most of that will come from the HVAC system running 24 hours a day, right?
That's terrifying.
One building.
That's absolutely terrifying.
Yeah, exactly. And
wow.
So I know, right? But interestingly, she talked about all the things that they're doing, and this is another fascinating, scary stat. They've already reduced their carbon footprint by 40% there. So it was 40% higher 6 years ago than that.
Wow. It's yeah.
She talked about how, you know, she talked about climate control, and she just glossed over it like, oh, we all know, you know, as working in museums, how like you have to do that, and then like move on very quickly. So it was just like an assumption that can't be questioned. But
That's really
I think
interesting.
if there's one thing that everyone should please take away from this meeting and webinar, it's that yes, that can be questioned. Please do question it.
And
Sure.
yeah, talk about it. Start the conversation. It's up to us 100% to start that conversation, because if we don't, no one else is going to.
Yeah. So I'll just throw in a couple, like, I really like ground up solutions as well, personal solutions. So a couple things, you know, that you can do without even having to ask your, you know, your institution for anything. I have to do a lot with personal technology, right? Because we all have our phones now, and we all have our computers, and we use at least 2, if not more, devices every day, whether we're going into work or we're now working from home, right? Depending where you are kind of in your situation. But there's a couple things that you can do that will really, you know, help you use less power with your personal devices. So one of the big things, and I don't know if anyone has noticed now with a lot of apps, including the new Zoom update, is something called dark mode, which means that it's not a white background with black text on top, it's a black background with white text on top. And that actually allows you to decrease your brightness by like half. So your computer uses, or your phone uses, much less energy, much less battery life. So I highly recommend trying. You can even on your phone, depending on what phone you have, you can put it on dark mode, and you'll be amazed how much longer your battery lasts. So give that a try. You can also,
Interesting. I will try that.
Yeah. Also, if you're on your personal phone, right, which you're still using during the day for work, if you go to the battery section, especially on an iPhone, right, there's a low power mode section. And if you click on that, it will keep your apps from running in the background, which just means, again, you're saving energy. Even though it's on a small level, if we start to get used to kind of these personal habits of trying to be sustainable, you know, you can buy that little special thing to charge your phone and have it turn off after 3 hours. That's level 2, but you know, starting on level 1.
Yeah.
Then, you know, if you're sort of used to doing it on a personal level, then I think it becomes a lot easier if everyone does it on a personal level for the institution to do it together.
Absolutely. I think that's so inspiring as well, because it is about individual responsibility. And another thing that I had no idea about is the carbon footprint of digital aspects. I did not know that email consumes a huge amount of energy. One of my SIC managers a couple of years ago put up a post of tips and tricks on our Thursday tips and tricks section about how cleaning out your inbox actually reduces a lot of energy. Because of course, if you think about it, all of our data, all of our digital lives, all of our songs that we download, movies that we stream, emails that we keep, have to actually be stored somewhere. And they're stored in these gigantic mega data centers. And these things are, right now, I think they consume, what was it? They're scheduled to be consuming like they consume the same amount of energy, or they have produced, this is what it is. Sorry, I'm getting my facts straight in my head. They produce the same amount of carbon emissions as the airline industry. And
wow.
that's today. They are expected by 2025 to produce 1/5 of the world's energy consumption.
That's amazing. I did not have any idea that it was that high.
Whoosh, it is unbelievable how high it is. And
Well,
I
that's
found
going
out
to actually motivate me to clear my inbox for the first time in years.
I had no idea. And I was the worst culprit. I had 7,000 emails in my, I mean, that's bad. Like
I think I
emails
have
dating back
about
to like 2014.
I don't want to talk about how many I have.
Well, that's in one of my 5 different, email accounts. I had absolutely no idea. So I spent like 2 months clearing it out. I'm now down to 495, which is not too bad for me.
Well done.
But it is still, oh God, it took a while. But I had no idea. Actually, there was a study done that says that little thing at the bottom of your email that says "think before you print, be green" has a larger carbon footprint than printing the email.
Oh no.
Isn't that shocking? I had no idea. And so, so I started doing research into this, and there's some things that we can do very easily, like what Mackenzie was saying, personal habits. We can be more conscientious about clearing out our emails. There are a lot of institutions and galleries that have these really beautiful signatures at the bottom that have I actually know someone who's a sustainability advocate, and he sends out videos and everything, but the carbon footprint on that is just astronomical, because of course every single email back and forth has that video, which then of course has to be stored somewhere. Also, increasing your privacy protective aspects of your web browsing, your internet browsing, can reduce your carbon footprint, because of course when there are cookies and when they're tracking you and when they see where you're going, that is all data that is then being stored and then used for other things. So it's not just about privacy protecting us, but privacy policies to protect the planet.
Well, that's good to know. Well, speaking of digital environmental concerns, blockchain is another one. And I know Mackenzie was calling me out on which type of blockchain specifically. So I still need to do some more research on
Cryptocurrency.
And in fact, I'm involved with a group called the Artwork Identification Standard, and we're going to be doing a talk next Monday as part of the Art FinTech webinar series, if anybody's interested, on kind of what that means and how it will be useful in the future. But I'm the head of the working group for technology for this thing, and one of the things that we're looking at is, what kind of platform will it be on? And our first thought was blockchain. And so we've now added to the agenda a kind of environmental angle of, making sure that whatever platform we choose is going to be sustainable, because obviously, that's very important for something that we think is going to be, you know, having a lot of longevity in the art world.
Yeah,
But
I think
people
it's really
should be thinking
easy.
about this in general with these kind of digital platforms.
Yeah. Well, I think it's easy to think about, you know, when we have started moving everything to the cloud, it to our normal everyday lives, it feels like it's in the clouds, like it's in the sky. You
Like
know,
right there.
it's like just above my head and it just goes onto my computer whenever I want it, but it comes from somewhere, it's stored somewhere. Yeah, and same thing. Yeah, like with cryptocurrency, everyone's like, oh, it's online. It's like not printed on paper. It's very, you know, it's very sustainable. And we actually now have cryptocurrency like moving into our other um our other spaces, including our art spaces, right? The ideas of cryptocurrency. But the thing is that the concept behind cryptocurrency is that it gains value and it gains size by mining, which essentially means not only do you have one photocopier on overnight, you have 5,000 running constantly, right?
Exactly.
Computers.
Exactly. Yeah. Mining is, I read an article recently as well about the carbon footprint of these cryptocurrencies. It's pretty astronomical.
Yeah.
So,
It's
but there
better to
are some
print it.
cryptocurrencies. Yeah, there are some currencies and blockchain organizations that are doing some incredible things. I know that there's one that has to do with fish, and every time that you mine something, they like donate to sustainable fishing or something. There was something really cool where they're protecting wildlife along with it. So there are some really great sustainable ones. I'll find that source and I'll send it to you guys so we can distribute with everyone.
Please do. But
yeah.
But this is reminding me of one more thing, which is speaking of cloud providers, I was recently looking into this in terms of which cloud providers have the greenest kind of credentials, because our cloud storage is with AWS, because that's like the industry leader for cloud storage. And that's actually something I would really love to pose to everyone in this webinar, is we've been considering whether we should switch, because there are some other cloud providers that have greener credentials. And while AWS has said that they will switch to 100% renewable energy sources, they have not done that so far. They're at, I think, 50%. Whereas some of the other providers are at 100%. So if you could let us know if you think that you would rather you know, be with a cloud storage provider that is not AWS, is not like, you know, the most famous, the most industry leading, but is greener, that we would love to know what you think about that.
Yeah, absolutely.
So Sherry just mentions that in their loan form, since 2013 or so, they have more flexibility with their set points. So that's great.
Oh,
that is wonderful to hear.
It's great to hear.
I've been speaking
Publicize it.
Yeah, please do. Because I was speaking recently to the Touring Exhibitions group about, because they have standard loan agreement forms that they provide their members here in the UK, and we were talking about them adding a provision for the Bizoit Green Protocol being okay in their standard lender agreement. So I hope that we can do that more globally.
Yeah, absolutely.
So why don't we pop in a bit to art movement, and then we have about 22 minutes left or so. So
goodness, time's going by.
Yeah, I know, right? We have so many things to talk about. So in terms of art movement, Annika, if you want to start off on this one, is there a couple points that you would say are particularly you know, things that can be implemented within 2020 in terms of sustainability?
Yes, I would first like to say that I think art movement is a really important point, but I also think that it's important to set the record straight, that a lot of people in the art world are focusing on art movement as the most important thing they can do that has the biggest impact. And that's actually not true. It's buildings are the things that have the biggest impact. This is the place where, you know, focus should really be made. However, I personally don't believe in saying, okay, you know, let's ignore everything else. I mean, I absolutely think we should be having more sustainable practices and reducing waste, and also air freight and all kinds of things in many ways, because the solution for you know, the climate emergency that we face is to do a lot of little things everywhere, like you were saying, in our personal lives, in our professional lives, and everywhere and anywhere that we can. But I just think it's also important to be aware of these things, you know, where the biggest percentage is
Mm-hmm.
of the carbon footprint that our industry has. So there is a really good article from ArtNet recently about this particular point, and we can share that with you guys maybe with the recording. Mackenzie, if you wouldn't mind including that. And anyway, so, but about movement and what you can do, I did see that Rockbox have joined us here in the call, and they're a great example of a reusable crate, which is, I believe, 40% lighter than the average crate. Museum crates are also very, very heavy, and turtle crates are too. Sorry to name shame, but that's something just to keep in mind. I know that that museum crates are also often reusable, so there's a lot of variables to all this, right, that you have to consider. I've heard even of a, I think it was Van de Wayne Gallery in New York. We were having a conversation about this at Frieze Masters last year, and Mike was telling me that they have been using I forget what it's called, but it's like what musicians use in the airplane for ages, which is reusable. And so again, maybe get in touch with them if you're interested in that potential solution. But
Flight cases.
Flight cases, thank
Catherine.
you. And so what is interesting though, before I move on from Rockbox, is they also have this kind of grid system that you can attach things to the crate. So it also eliminates the need for a lot of packaging. And I think a really important point, we were talking earlier about knowing your carbon footprint, and an area that's missing currently from, as far as I know, everyone's evaluation of their carbon footprint is crate waste and packaging waste for transit. Because shippers think of it as the galleries and the museums waste, and museums and galleries think of it as the shippers waste, and so nobody is thinking of it as their own waste.
Exactly.
Needs to change, clearly. But there is a lot, and especially if you're using, plastic-related packaging, that's not great for many reasons. And of course, you have to also think, Andrew from Rockbox is always reminding me, are you worried about the plastic problem? Or are you worried about the carbon footprint? You can't solve everything. And
yes, we can. Sorry, Andrew. But we're going to do it all.
I mean, he has a point in terms of, like, if carbon footprint is your goal, then here's the things. But personally, I also feel like I was really frightened to hear the statistic that I think by 2030 there will be more pieces of plastic in the ocean than people in the world. So that's a disturbing stat. Yeah. So I think I hope we can tackle all of these things.
I think there's a lot of different aspects of art movement and transportation. Obviously the crates is a huge issue. That's one of the most prevalent questions that I get is, we don't, and most institutions that I know do not reuse their crates. They make the crates for a specific object, but they don't have the storage space to keep them around. So they just throw them away. So it is really nice that there are options like Rockbox. And I know that and Turtle also is a reusable crate system, that do offer a reusable option, and that doesn't have to be stored on site. So that's one really, I think, a win-win situation is when you can find these types of initiatives or these types of products that are available that reduce the waste. And I'm always getting questions about, is there a substitute or an alternative for Mylar or for the types of plastics that we're using in the crating systems? Well, we need more research into that, I think. And I know, Annika and I have been talking about some different projects that might be interesting to develop in terms of finding solutions for that. But it's not just about the materials itself, and thank you for bringing this up, Annika, because it's also about the actual transportation and the shipping as well. But not just the shipping of the objects, but also the people who have to accompany them. Yes. And it's also an interesting thing about the carbon footprint of travel of our personnel, and also how much money that costs. I was talking to the director of a museum, and she was saying that they might spend up to 150,000 euro on one transportation for one object, because they have to pay for the transport, they have to pay for the person to go accompany it, and it's going to fly all the way to Japan. business class, of course, darling.
Yeah.
I mean, it's
Yeah.
really quite amazing how much, and in terms of carbon emissions of museums and institutions, it's just those, as you said, it's not being included or considered really, and it's a
Yeah.
huge impact.
It is, and that's something we're also looking at with our virtual courier solution, is how
Cool.
to remove the need for staff to travel with artwork when it goes for loans or traveling around. And I think
Oh,
that
it's
that's
brilliant.
another important piece of the puzzle, certainly.
Yeah,
And also in
absolutely.
terms of cost reduction, as you say, I mean, I've heard stories of an operating budget. I've heard that it can be half of the operating budget for an entire touring exhibition is the cost of couriers, and that can be up to like £300,000 for one project. So yeah.
Do we really need to spend that money? And this is, this gets me all fired up about all of these things about blockbuster exhibitions and, the loan culture that we have today. I mean, it makes me sad that we've got 95% of our collections sitting in storage units that no one's ever going to see. And then
I
we're
know.
shipping in the same painting that I saw in Denmark to Paris. That's also going to be going to, Cairo next week. And it's like, we're not, are we celebrating our own cultural heritage now, or are we celebrating our neighbors? I don't
Meme
know.
culture.
Well, I think, yeah, to be honest, I really agree with you, and I really think that we do need to rethink this. And actually, we are anyway, because of COVID-19. A lot of museums are turning much more to their collections than they have done for years. Personally, I think that this is a great thing. And as someone who comes from a collections management and conservation background, it's made me really sad and depressed how the budgets for that area have been slashed and slashed since the last recession. And that, in general, so many people working with collection material, they have no money to store it properly, to maintain it properly, to conserve it. And some conservation departments I've spoken to, even at national museums, and I won't name them because it might be embarrassing, but they have said, we can only afford to conserve things that are requested for loan. That's it.
Yeah, no, I know most institutions follow that rule because, those are the priority pieces. And then aren't we lucky if we have time to look at our own collection?
But the idea that some external, that your conservation program is determined by the random request of an external body is actually crazy. And what we really ought to do is, spend the money that we were going to on blockbuster exhibitions on collection care, deaccessioning projects, get rid of the half of the rubbish that we should, not be focusing on, sell it, raise some money for the collections, focus on the collections that we have, learn about them, share it with the world, digitize it, let academics have access, make it accessible, which is what we're supposed to be doing in the first place. But people can't because they don't have the staff and the facilities and the storage. And, I think really museums could use a big shakeup in the next 5 years in terms of why they're here and what their purpose is,
Yeah, no, I completely agree with that.
And I think to put this, a little bit on marketing and communications professionals out there, if there are any in attendance, I'm sure there are, is that, I think what I was just saying about meme culture, a lot of the reason that we have this kind of incredible loan culture that we have now is due to the advent of the internet and the fact that there are now pieces that are associated so strongly with a famous artist that is the only piece that's requested because that's the one that people want to see because that's what people are going to pay the ticket for, right? So it's kind of on marketing and communications professionals to go to your conservators and to your registrars and to all of the professionals in your organization and say, hey, we have this one piece by this guy. What else do we have by him? And can we talk about it? And can we put it out on our social channels? And can we, create a blog about it on our website? And then the more people who know about other pieces, that just haven't become famous oftentimes because that one is just the one that's on the main page of the website, or the one that everyone has heard of because it's the picture that's gone around in a meme, then, the better you'll be at having your collection displayed and people wanting to go visit it rather than needing to bring stuff in.
Yeah, and I just saw a little thing on the chat from Agnes, and I wanted to to address that, because I think that's a really, really excellent point. Because a lot of what she was saying that, while we need to be considering more carefully our blockbuster exhibitions, it's also an accessibility issue. And there are people that can't afford to travel to these places to see these artworks. So, part of our jobs is to be able to bring things to them so that they can also have the same rights and ideas of enjoying this work. And I agree with that a lot. And I think that this is a really interesting ethical debate as well about the social aspects and our responsibilities on a social level and to our communities versus also the climate impact. And then is there something like a happy medium here where we start talking about, okay, we're digitizing all of our collections, so maybe that's a way that people can access them without actually being able to go there, or without them having to go, or without the collections having to go to them. But then we're getting into the whole thing about, okay, we've got all of these data centers who are housing, consuming massive amounts of energy by housing all of our collections now digitally. So
it's a complex issue.
It's a very complex issue, I think.
But, yeah. And actually on that same vein, you are also making me think about how when you're talking about Venice and Rome and diversity and kind of the fairness of allowing other people to enjoy this like cultural treasure, one of the things that is also kind of wrong about having the rigorous climate control that we do for lender agreements, the requirements, is that it also restricts a lot of smaller museums from being able to participate in lending, right?
That's a great point.
Yeah, and in fact, it ends up becoming something that is for the wealthy white museums, in effect, to be able to do, which is
100%. There's so many institutions that either can't afford to have climate controls, or they can't afford to have such rigorous ones, so they get excluded from that in the first place. So that's actually really valuable to think about that. And I also always wonder about museums that don't have climate control. I mean, I worked with a woman in Indonesia, and she was saying, I gave a presentation about sustainability, and she came up to me afterwards and she said, we're already doing all the stuff that you're saying, but it's not because we're trying to be sustainable, it's because we can't afford it. But they're still running their museum and they still house their collection, and I would be very interested in
maybe we should look to them as leaders.
Really,
turn it on its head.
How do you yeah, absolutely. I think we should look into that very seriously.
Yeah,
I agree.
Before everyone, because we have about 8 minutes left, why don't we jump into our poll, and then we can finish up by talking about conservation collections management?
Yes, and I would also just like to point out that there's a lot of chat going on that has been just to the panelists. And so if you have,
it's just us who are seeing it.
If you've made a comment, just double check quickly to see if you have posted it just to the panelists or panelists and attendees, if you can switch it to attendees as well, so that everyone can have the benefit of your wisdom and your words.
Yeah, there are some great comments coming in and questions.
Yeah.
Okay, so we have a couple polls we're going to talk about. We've been kind of talking about the Bizoid, and Annika just brought it up again, so I think this is a good time to kind of bring this in. It's definitely something we'd like to talk about in more detail. And so for all of you who are with us today, we'd actually this first one is about using the Bizoid protocol. So we've talked about it a bit, and we know some museums are working towards it, or planning on it, or have it, or not planning on using it, have never heard of it. So we'd love to know, where you are with that, or if you're using one of the other guidelines, right? So, Caitlin has brought up the ASHRAE protocol and the AICCM guidelines.
Yeah, or AIC or any of the other ones, but I think
we have some yeses. That's great.
Yeah.
Who are the yeses?
Yeah, I want to know who you are.
Point yourself out in the chat.
Yeah, let's praise you.
Yeah. Give everyone a minute just to answer this.
Yeah, I'm very curious.
Yeah, and then the next one, just so that everyone knows, is it's going to be trying to figure out what the blocks are to implementing it, because that's a big part of all of us working together, all of these different institutions and different sides of the problem working together, right? So that we can try to find universal solutions to breaking down those barriers and making sure that everyone has access to the information that they need and the resources they need, and
Absolutely.
anything else. So if anyone else would like to answer, please go ahead, and then I will share this. Okay, fantastic. So let's see, what have we come up with here? Okay, so it looks like 9 of you have it implemented. So like we said, don't be shy.
Yeah.
Feel free to put your hand up in the chat.
Yes, we want to be your friends.
Yes, we want to be your friends.
Absolutely. We want to,
and some are implementing it now, working on implementing it. More than half of you have not heard of it. So
let us.
No judgment.
No, not at all. We are here to tell you
hear
everything
about
you want to know about it. Yeah. Okay. We really definitely need to do a whole webinar on just this.
We do. We do. It seems like we do. So we want you to know about this because it's something that is gonna help.
And just to tell you in a nutshell about what it is, it's about both looking at reusable crates and packaging from a transport point of view and investigating those, but it's also specifically about relaxing your climate conditions. And we will post when we send the recording, Mackenzie, if that's all right with you, we will post a link to the exact protocol so that you know. But it's basically, I think it's like 18 degrees to 24 degrees instead of, the 18 to 20, or it's like a 6-degree range rather than a 2 or 3 degree range. It's just a bit more relaxed, and also the relative humidity is also, I think, more relaxed from. I know it's more relaxed from a 24-hour period. So I think it's, instead of plus or minus 5% in a 24-hour period, it's like 20%. So it's just that. It's just a relaxing of the degrees and the RH in a 24-hour period for the climate control parameters of the artwork on display.
Okay, so let's pop into our second one here. So for those of you who haven't heard of Bizoid before, just keep this in mind as being, what are the barriers to your organization implementing relaxing of climate controls or general sustainability measures? So what are the barriers to your organization implementing Bizoid protocol or generally climate relaxing? So this is really interesting because we're kind of looking at, is it an internal concern? Is it an external concern from your institution? Is it something to do with, your leadership not being interested in working on this type of project? Is it about the collection itself, right? So there's a lot of different angles that we can, sort of break the barriers down.
Absolutely. And there clearly are barriers because these protocols were established in 2008, everyone. So it's been 12 years that they've been around, and we haven't all adopted them yet. We're really glad to see that 9 of you have, but clearly, that's still the minority. And just while we're waiting for that, I've seen in the Q&A that someone was asking about the virtual career idea and whether we can elaborate on it. I know that for some of the rest of you, we did an entire webinar dedicated to this recently, so I don't want to, bore anyone, but I will just briefly say that the idea is basically in reaction to a concern that a lot of museums have had about the fact that they want things to be able to travel for loans, but they're worried about asking staff to travel with those things for the next couple of years. And some museums have even gone to the extent of canceling all of their loans for 2 years in reaction to this issue. And so what we're thinking about is basically using technology in order to kind of bridge the gap to make museums feel more comfortable. And so having someone on the lender side while something is being condition reported and then packaged, having that filmed, and then, the shipper picks it up and they see it going onto the truck. All of that still kind of remains the same, except that it's documented more with video. And then from there, the shipper or an independent third party go to the airport and do the supervision, but again, filming it on video so that the lender institution can have kind of remote overview of this process, having multiple checkpoints going through to the borrowing institution, and then possibly an independent local on that side acting as the advocate and for the lending institution, and then again documenting this through video so that the lending institution itself has eyes and an overview, and also maybe the ability at certain checkpoints to give an approval before proceeding to the next checkpoint. So it's mainly around that, a secure video system that allows collaboration internationally, remotely.
Yeah. So let's see, we have gotten our results here and just share it with everyone. So the barriers, the biggest one seems to be lender agreements.
That's interesting. I saw that touring exhibition group is here.
Mm-hmm.
So
yes.
hopefully Charlotte Dew can take that on board. That's really great to understand. Thank you, everyone.
Charlotte commented.
Yeah.
And then the next one would be concerns over preservation, and then not being sure how to implement it. So those are our top three, which is actually not necessarily what I expected. Actually,
Yeah, that's really interesting. I'm really glad to see that a lot of people don't think leadership buy-in is as much of an issue, and or an internal champion. So if people feel like they can get those, then really we should be able to overcome the others, right? Because lender agreements should be something that if there's a will, there's a way to change them, I would have thought. And being unsure how to implement it and concerns over preservation. So those are the kind of top concerns that you have. With concerns over preservation, so the science for this has been done. The Bizoit Green Protocol was created and endorsed by the Louvre and several other really major institutions. I think the Met, the kind of the big guns. But then also it's endorsed by the National Museums Directors Council here in the UK, which again is all the most major museums. However, it's also interesting to note that while they endorse it, none of them have actually adopted it to my knowledge yet. Maybe it's some of the 9 though, so let me know if I'm wrong about that. And so I think the science is there. However, I totally understand that there is still this concern, people have, because they maybe part of it is educational and they need to see those reports for themselves. But another thing that we're hoping to do is to help support this process. And we will talk about that further in another webinar, but the kind of the nutshell is that we can have a pilot project where you can adopt the Green Protocol in a gallery, you can upload the environmental monitoring sensor data, you can upload the object details, you can do periodic spot checks to make sure everything is still okay, and then a report through ArtEcheck to say at the end of the 6 months or year or whatever trial period, to do an evaluation to say, oh, actually everything is still fine. And then you can, relax it in galleries 2, 3, 4, and then 7, 8, 9. And you can start with the gallery that has the least sensitive material in it, and you can kind of take it from there. So we're really interested and excited to launch the Art Goes Green initiative. And part of that is going to be working with arts organizations on a plan to implement this and to address those concerns. So watch out for another thing about that.
Yeah, definitely. So I did see another question a little bit farther up, which was about the little pieces of paper at museums, the maps and the flyers, and how do you reduce those? And I can come in on that just quickly. I can't actually find it, but I thought it was a good question because there is a lot of little pieces of paper floating around at museums, right? And galleries, any sort of event. So I think number one, if you're looking at a museum map, some museums already do this where they actually have maps that you just turn in at the end, you don't keep them. And I think that's a really easy way, right? To, instead of just having people bring them home with them, have a place where you can reuse them. And you can also make them sturdier so that, yes, initially you pay whatever 50 cents more to make them, but then you get to use them 50 times instead of once. Okay, so that's one option. And then the other is, of course, although we have been talking a lot about data storage, but is about creating an app. And some museums have done great apps that have that have all of the maps on them, and they have the special exhibitions, and you can get notifications when they have new exhibitions and all sorts of things. And that's great because then when your map changes, when you change a gallery around, you don't have to then print out a new set of paper maps. It just changes in the app. So multiple options for that.
Yeah, I wonder if, does anybody know if Smartify has maps in it? Because it's also a nice idea to have like one app, right, that has like lots of museums that you normally go to, and you can kind of not have to download 50 different apps for each museum. But so that's something else to look at in the future.
I think this is a good last one to hit on. Megan has asked, what is your advice for someone who wants to be a champion in their organization for sustainability? How do you approach that?
Join our ambassador program.
Yes.
That's the question I get asked most often, and that's why we started the ambassador program, is because people want to be sustainable, but they don't know where to start. They don't have the support of their upper management maybe, or they don't know how to start approaching upper management. That is literally what we're doing, is creating a program to get the buy-in from the upper management, allow you to start making sustainable choices, and helping support the actions and implementing them. So I think that's absolutely an incredibly important question. It's very difficult to get buy-in from staff. So what we're doing is we're creating communication guides as well that will help to figure out how to talk about these issues with your peers, with your colleagues, with your bosses, with your upper management. And then we're creating a support system to help you see that you're not the only one, and that there's going to be a local network to start actually taking some action and making these choices. So come join us. Check out our website. And once again, we're going to be launching this publicly starting, I think the announcement's going out in July. So hope to see you guys there.
Yeah.
That's fantastic.
So I've just put the link, into the chat.
You. Yes, that's actually the link for our workshops, but please join us at the workshops as well. We'll be talking more about sustainability, giving more tips and advice on ways to start implementing sustainability. The first one is about introduction to sustainability, which talks about communication strategies and how to approach this issue in the workplace and what things can be done right away. Absolutely. So thank you for the shout out there. Absolutely.
Yeah,
That's
of course.
Great. And I see another question, which is, do you have any resources for development of older buildings more sustainably so we can create an environmental buffer with construction materials instead of depending on AHU? That is a really great question, and I don't know if Caitlin does, but I would just like to mention here that one of the things which we will talk about in a follow-up webinar when we discuss Art Goes Green with a little bit more detail, when it's a little bit more formalized, which we're working on at the moment, is about fundraising for these initiatives. A lot of people in the commercial sector are really interested in supporting museums, and that generally speaking, there's not a whole lot of, cross fertilization, and and that's one of the things which I think is great. Actually, right here, we've got a lot of different, we've got museums, we've got galleries, we've got shippers, and at Articheck, we work with all of these different players, the public and the private sector, and I think that it would really be great in this case to have this be something that unites us: sustainability, how we can work on it, how we can support each other. And one of the things that we've been talking about is creating a donation or offset button, which would be there in the kind of art world online sphere when you're purchasing an artwork, or if you're shipping an artwork somewhere for transport, you'd have the opportunity to donate to initiatives which are supporting sustainable practices, and maybe also things like helping museums to deal with older buildings and retrofitting them to be more sustainable and more efficient in terms of their installation and things, and hiring architects to help with that process, and making sure that we were talking earlier about an example of a museum, and I won't name and shame them, but they're a London-based small museum which has an HVAC system that has not ever worked very well, but they spend £250,000 on anyway yearly, even though they're a very small museum. And part of this is because their ex-museum director, when asked by the head of conservation if they could just switch it off and go back to the historic building's original passive method of dealing with environmental control, which actually worked much better, he was told no, because the awnings that would be required in order to fit that out are too ugly. So but I'm sure that we could make beautiful contemporary awnings if we, contracted a designer, and I'm sure that there's lots of great solutions to these problems if we, tackle them together. So, but we will all need funds, to do that, and I think that there must be creative ways, in which we can gain those funds.
Yeah. So Imogen. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to ask Caitlin if you guys have any resources specifically around that, though, because we don't. I can say the usual, ICOM and.
Yeah, I mean, we do a lot because we span all of cultural heritage. We do work a lot more in, for example, adaptive reuse and with historical buildings. So we work with with CLIC, which is a Horizon 2020 funded project that works at circularity in adaptive reuse of historical monuments. So definitely check out CLIC. It's CLIC. They're one of our partners, and they do fantastic work with it in this area. And then we also work with the Center for Sustainable Heritage, which is basically a partnership between 3 universities here in the Netherlands, and they do some really incredible work also in this area. I've got I think 6 of their scholars are now in one of my workshops, and we've been talking a lot about this lately. So would love to get some more information for you guys, but we'll have to come back to that, because that's a whole nother thing that I could just go on for a couple of hours about. So
well,
I'll just
maybe
say,
we'll have another webinar about that.
Yeah, send me an email. We'll talk about it. Yeah.
And then lastly, Imogen is saying, what would be a good foundation to donate to? So I'm sure you all have, Caitlin and Annika have good ideas. I also would just say, maybe do a earmarked donation to your local museum and tell them, here's some money, but it's for this, right? So if you want your institutions to be more sustainable, sometimes the direct institution needs the donation, right?
Well, and we will be creating a nonprofit to help manage that, or using Julie's bicycle as or you guys, we need to work this out, but we're going to find a nonprofit bank account that we can
You have plenty
utilize.
To choose from.
Yeah, and in order to get this Art Goes Green thing off the ground, which will be all about kind of supporting arts organizations to reduce their carbon footprint in lots of different ways. So that's something that I would definitely encourage you to give generously to, and we can definitely tell you more about that. But I also actually earlier had a call with Heath from Thomas Dane, who's here, and they are founding the group that I mentioned earlier, the Gallery Climate Coalition, and he told me about another very interesting organization, which is called clientearth.org. And they are using, I'm just looking at their thing now, they are using the power of the law to achieve systemic change and protect people, nature, and the planet. So they're suing governments who are not basically following the Paris Agreement that have agreed to. And so that's another really interesting organization that I think could use support and could drive real change. And actually, we were discussing earlier about how it'd be really great to have kind of a portfolio of things, you know, maybe through Art Goes Green, that look at, you know, the macro, the micro, the in-between crow.
Yeah,
And,
I think
you know,
I think that that's also something that would be really helpful for that specific movement or initiative, is to have those reliable sources. Because sometimes people say, okay, well, you know, I'd be very happy to, for example, carbon offset by donating a certain amount of money to a charity, but I need to know where the money is going and that it's a reliable source. So that would be something that maybe Annika, you and I can talk about, ways to make lists, because that's also something I'm already looking into, but that would be something
absolutely.
that we could put together. I
Very
am going to take a hot second to shamelessly self-promote myself.
Yeah.
do it.
Yes.
So if you want to make a donation to a foundation, Key Culture is a nonprofit, and we just launched our first big fundraising campaign. We were accepted to the Global Giving platform, which allows us to fundraise for the first time in the US and the UK. So now all donations
Great.
to the US and UK are tax deductible. And basically we have to raise, it's $5,000 in 3 weeks from 40 donors in order to become permanent partners for them. And of course, this would be a great way to have future fundraising opportunities for us to do things like help fund Art Goes Green and all of these different things that we've been talking about today that we need, that we want to fund. So, you know, funds from that will go to help developing the Sustainability Ambassador Program, so that we can help you become a champion at your institution. So check out the website and that'll help you out. So there's my shameless plug
Yes.
for our fundraising campaign.
Good. Yeah, do
Good.
it.
So
I wasn't aware
thanks
of
for the
that. That's
question.
really...
Oh yeah, I've been in full fundraising mode for the past like 2 weeks. It's been absolutely amazing, all of the support. But yeah, we just launched on Monday. We've already got over 40 donors, and it's really exciting. But could use all of the help and support. We're going to be doing a whole series of really cool live events. Tomorrow we have a live Q&A session with Jonathan Ashley Smith, who was the head of conservation at the Victorian Albert Museum for like 30 years. We're also going to be having a Q&A session with Frances Morris, who's the director of Tate Modern, on Tuesday. So for more information about that, check out our website or follow us on social media. And you know,
Great.
please come
Well,
join
Francis,
us.
if I wonder if Tate is on the Bezoit.
I was actually going to ask her that.
Yeah, do.
Yeah, I work with her. I work with her on the ICOM working group on sustainability. So she's super into it. She's really passionate about it. So I would be surprised if she wasn't. Yeah,
good.
Absolutely. So.
Okay. So we've now officially gone 17 minutes over. So I think we'll leave it. No. We've done well. And you know, we could keep going for until, you know, the cows come home. But I think very American phrase, sorry about that. But I think we'll probably wrap up here. It's a good place to kind of finish up. Thank you so much, Caitlin, for joining us. So much information that you've given us, resources, everything.
I hope it's helpful. Thank you so much for having me. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Thank you. I'm definitely going to go and sort out my inbox and buy one of those monitors as well, so that my phones can be not on all night.
The more you know, the more positive change you can make. It's all about knowledge. It's all about educating yourself. So absolutely. Thank you guys.
Thank you.
Yeah,
bye,
definitely.
everyone.
Thank you, everyone.
All right.
Goodbye.
Everyone have a lovely evening. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Bye.